What's up, you guys? Happy Wednesday. So we'll admit what just happened is that often I think Brandon does things just to get under my skin, and he was like having a drink and going with this, having a drink, and I smacked it out of his hand and got him all wet. It was not my best moment, but it was kind of funny.
I guess it leads us into the topic of your interpretation and assumptions can go down the wrong path real quick.
So anyway, how are you guys? Give us a hello when you jump on. Hopefully you're having a great Wednesday. But your eyes look so blue in that color. So
Yeah.
it's good. All right, guys. So today I want to talk about, we're talking about a lot of life events happening and, just the idea that...
Seems all wet.
Why? The idea that hurt people, right? So wounded people that have been through things, often are the ones that then continue that cycle. So we want to shed some light on that and kind of give you guys some understanding of what happens when you peel back the layers with yourself and you start to shift things inside of yourself, the kind of awareness it's going to bring you for what else is going on with other people and in their worlds. So you can actually understand that like people aren't innately just bad, terrible people, but there's a lot more probably gone on in their life to get them to that point.
So I think, yet again, episode 72, right? And 73. Mm-hmm. So yet again, everything that we tend to talk about kind of rolls in together with the previous topic we were talking about, right? And so with all these things that we were talking about yesterday of going in and self-identifying and why these things are so vital that we found in our own life experience, but also with the clients that we coach, is the second you peel back the layers and kind of understand that you have your own, and one of the words that Courtney used for a long time that would provide a spark for me was wounding, right? Like you have your own wounds, you have your own things that you have internally that you may not even know, you may be blind to, you may have covered up for years, but they're still there, they're still evident, and they show up in your life even on ways that you're not aware of, right? And so, when we're talking about these things, because yet again, you're seeing a lot of these things transpire from the beginning of quarantine throughout, and then now you're seeing them come up even more, right? And I think you could watch, even roll through probably Facebook. I know I can, of like, one person will have this view and it will have another view, but then it will have a argument to justify this view and then another argument to justify the other view. And it turns into basically this ongoing argument to just justify and vindicate the views that we have for whatever we do, right? And so, obviously surrounding the time of what we're talking about is when we kind of, I'll leave it on myself, okay? So when I've gone through my own experiences of when I've looked at times in my life when, yet again, I've lashed out and I've used words as kind of ammunition and violent actions, right? Like not on physical aspects, but on the vocalization towards the people that I love the most, and that was where my anger was directed towards. Well, it was until I really looked inside myself and understood that all the anger was the anger that I had for myself, and I didn't know what to do with it, right? I was super unhappy with myself. I was super just disappointed, angry, frustrated, depressed at certain times. Like there was all these emotions that I didn't know what to do with. And so what I did is I would lash out, right? And so there's no right for that. But until I got to see that I was really hurting, I was really upset, I was frustrated, I was depressed, I was whatever. And my reaction to feel significant, to get certainty, to get my needs met, was to lash out at somebody else, right? And I think until we can maybe understand that for ourselves and see how we do that, right? Like me being able to look and be honest of that's how I've gone about doing things, right? Like some people do that in physical altercations, right? Like for my dad's aspect, right? Like for those that don't know, right? I grew up in a household that was physical, that had violence, had all these kind of things that went forth. But just talking to my dad, like he used vocalization, but he also was physical, right? Like he went out and his way of getting certainty and feeling significant and everything else was going and getting into a bar fight, right? Like doing those type of things was his way of doing it. And at the same time, that was also the environment in which I grew up in, right? Like we've talked about that before, is by age 5, we get about 50% of the modeling of our world created. By age 18, we get about 95% of our world created, right? And so it's important for us to identify and see these things is because we continue to pass along our stories from generation to generation, right? Like it's not being oblivious and ignoring history, but it's being aware of what we are doing and understanding that my own scars, my own stories, my own angerment, all these things that I hold on, I also am passing on those things to my kids yet again if I'm not aware of that, right? Like all my anger, all my hurt, all my pain, all my things that I'm going to pass on to my kids, which in turn their pain, their frustration, the things that cultivate and get created within them, or they are also going to lash out and probably have the same response that I did.
Well, I think this is a really interesting thing is that if you really think about it, like we are all born perfect, loving beings, right? And then life happens to us. And for a lot of people, life happens in a lot more traumatic ways than for others, right? But I don't care if you've had the best life ever, there's been trauma in your life, right? And this was something that I went through because I had a very loving household. I had all those things and I was like, why do I have this trauma that manifested in an eating disorder, right? And so again, like there was little things, whether someone said something to you as you're a kid, whether you were bullied as a kid, whether it was the people that were taking care of you, like whatever it was, like that creates trauma in our bodies and makes us create certain stories and beliefs around it that then let us act in certain ways. And so I think that's been one of the things for us as we started to pull back the layers on ourselves. Now when I look at the world, I don't go, oh my gosh, that guy was just, oh my God, he was so wrong, or that girl, that was so wrong, that was terrible. They're just an evil person, right? Because that's not true, right? And so when people are capable of doing bad things to other people, they've probably had bad, hurtful trauma happen to them. And that's unfortunately like, that's what they know. And that I'm not justifying it, but you need to understand that people are capable of hurting people because they've been hurt themselves.
Well, and they're also, I think it's important to also see that is we're also capable of hurting ourselves via drugs, via alcohol, via sex, via self-wounding, the other aspects of how we hurt ourselves, right? Like that's why a lot of people turn to drugs. They turn to alcohol. They try to numb. They try to avoid. They try to change their focus. They change their state in an instant, right? Like they turn to food. We just on the instance of not on a physical altercation or yelling or violence or whatever, we do these things to ourselves, right? And I think it's coming from the place of like understanding of, how could somebody do that to themselves? How could somebody do that to somebody else? Well, it's because that person is in probably even more pain than you could imagine to cause them to be able to even fathom doing that to another person.
Right, or to themselves.
Exactly.
And I think that's the biggest thing that we've started to see is that when you can ask the questions of like, well, what's going on there, right? Like in current events, like what's been going on for police officers, for people of color, for all of this stuff, right? Like none of those events should have happened. We've made our point very clear on that. But like what was going on in all of their lives 2 months ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, right? Because like nothing happens like just because of itself, right? And we talk about with Shift, when we talk about your own life and your own health, all of it's connected. And it's the same thing in this world. All of these things are connected, right? And so we have these conversations a lot with our clients about like, oh, my boss is this or my boss is that. And I'm like, well, what's their life like at home? What was their childhood like? What are they trying to do, right? And if you can start to go, okay, these are the questions I ask myself. And a lot of times you don't know the answers, but you can kind of decide like, well, if one day your boss is just being a total jerk, well, you don't know. Did he just get in a fight with his wife? Is something going on with his kids? Is he really unhappy about something? Is his mom dying? Like there's always so many things going on in our lives that we don't show, right? And so our hope is that when you interact with people, take a breath, right? Understand where you are. And we've caught ourselves in this. Like if we're stressed out about work or business or something, and the kids ask us a question, if I'm not in a great place and I'm stressed about something else, I'm like, oh my God, why can't you get the whatever? Well, you can get it because it's 6 feet up, right? Like you can catch yourself in that though, of like, what state are you in and what's going on in your world? And so with people in your life, if you start to see these things happening, you got to take a couple steps back. The whole world right now is in a heightened state of stress and loss of, in my opinion, loss of freedom and all of these things. So like when people are doing things, give them a little bit of grace and ask what else could be going on in their life, because most likely it's not about you, right? If someone says something, does something, etc. to you, it's probably not about you. And if you're purposely doing things to yourself that are harming you, ask yourself a couple levels deeper, like what's actually going on? What need am I trying to meet? Why am I doing this? Why am I thinking these thoughts? Like there's always 3 or 4 levels deep are going to start to get you to the truth of what's really going on, right? And so right now the world needs more compassion. It needs more understanding. It needs less blanket statements about people that are good or bad or otherwise, right? Like there are good people that do bad things. There are bad people that have had really bad things happen to them that have gotten them to that place in their life where they have so much wounding. That's the state that they're in, right? And again, we talked about this, like the only thing that gets us through this is understanding ourselves, is truly coming from love, is noticing our own judgment, stopping that judgment, understanding, asking questions, trying to see all sides of every story. Because when you start to do that, a lot of that stuff is going to start to fall away, and you're going to start to have this light that you want to shine on the world, that you want to help people see what's happening with them, with their relationships, with their families. And as that starts to ripple effect in the world, that's where we're really going to see bigger change.
Well, and it's just like Courtney said, obviously you said judgment, but I also think blame, right? Like we blame so much outside of ourselves. We blame right now the cops. We blame, the black community. We blame, this community over here. We do all these things. We blame. We blame the virus, right? Like we blame China for releasing it. We blame, all these different things that are going on. And I think it's important I think it's unrealistic to say stop blaming, because that's just part of it, right? Like things are going to happen, but I think the important thing is stop blaming from your head, right? Stop blaming from your head and actually blame from your soul. Because I think when you blame from your soul, it allows you to see the other perspective of somebody else, right? It's kind of, we talked about that debate, right? Like when you're looking at a story, read the other side of the story so you can get both sides of it, so you can make an educated decision on what you want to do, right? But when you're blaming and you're coming from a lot of emotionality, a lot of intensity, a lot of these things that we're seeing right nowadays, it's coming from our heads, right? And it's coming from our heads because right now our world is just inundated with so much fear, right? Like there's just fear everywhere we look, right? You get on social media, there's fear. You get on the news, there's fear. You walk down the street, there's fear. You walk through the grocery store, there's fear. God forbid somebody's not wearing a mask. God forbid it's somebody who itches their nose. God forbid, like all these different elements that are going on, right? And we turn and we start blaming. We start feeling like you're the reason why you're going to do this. This is the reason. And I'm guilty of it, right? Like I've walked through the store and be like, this is the damn reason why we're in lockdown, right? Because nobody takes care of themselves. I've rolled through the stores myself on there, right? Like, but it's at the same time, it's understanding that when I'm focusing and using just this, that is rooted in fear, and its job is to protect me and keep me alive, and it has all the stories of 2 million years of humanity being already built into it. I need to get out of that and actually come from a different place and understand that the blame needs to come from my soul as another human being to another, as another human being in this world of understanding that what I do will affect another person, right? And understanding that, yet again, there's a reason why that person has gotten to that point for what they are reacting to. Because when it comes down to it, most times than not, we're acting because we care about ourselves, right? Like, more times than not, I'm not reacting. I'm not doing these things because I'm worried about somebody else outside of myself. Usually it's because I'm trying to meet my needs based off of the way that my structure is already built in there, right? But it's getting aware of that can change and evolve and allow me to see things from a different place. But when it comes to blaming, you guys, I'm not going to ask you to not blame because that's not realistic. But I'm going to ask you to stop blaming from your head and blame from your soul. And I promise if you can actually blame from your soul and come from a different place, you're probably going to see it from a different perspective and have more compassion. And that's honestly what I think we need right now in this moment in time.
Yeah. And I mean, I kind of have a different opinion on that. Like, if you're blaming someone, you're still looking outside of yourself, right? And so whatever you see in the world is a projection of your inner world. So if you need to blame someone, you need to blame yourself, right? Like, it just is. It's that projection of like what part of that that thing that you're noticing and seeing that's upsetting you, well, part of that lives in you because it does, right? And I know that's hard to hear, and we've talked about this before, like when Braden and I used to talk about like looking inward and everything's your own wounding and healing and all that kind of stuff, he'd be like, it's not true, it's not true. And then the deeper we got into it, it's like, oh, it really is, right? And so noticing that stuff of like what you're seeing and what you're projecting and what's coming through right now in this world that seems chaotic, that's a reflection of where you are internally, right? So again, we say this all the time, but slow down, meditate, do a visualization, do some breath work, do something that gets you to come inward, right? Because you can't do it from here. You can't logically be like, okay, I'm just going to figure all this stuff out here. It doesn't work. You've got to learn how to drop into your body. You've got to learn how to connect to your soul, to your intuition, to that trust and to that knowing, because it's there, right? But so many of us are afraid to listen to it because it's not, it's a quieter, it's a whisper, right? Like there's whispers going on in all of our lives. We need to learn how to listen to them. So it's really, hey Nate, it's really learning to go, okay, well, what's happening in their life? How can I give them more compassion? How can I give myself more compassion? We've said this before. If you can't do it for yourself, you can't do it for somebody else, right? And you might think you can, but you can't. So if you want to be more compassionate, you want to be more love, you've got to turn that into yourself, because whatever you give to yourself will flow out of you so much more clear, right?
Well, it's that empty cup, right? Like you can't pour from an empty cup. And so many of us try doing that, right? Like our cup is empty and we're always trying to pour into other people. But what is it? You can only receive what you can.
Yeah, you can only give what you can receive.
Yeah.
Or you can only receive the amount you love yourself. But it's that be the change you want to see in the world, right? If you think the world needs us, you have to be that thing, right? Like you can't be light and love if you're unhappy with yourself, right? It's just you can't. And so when we continue to say, look inward, pull back your layers, understand yourself, when you do that, you will instinctually start to understand the world better and see the world from different lenses. And I'm going to know that's been true for us. Like again, you guys, we feel like when you start to do this work, the blinders will start to come off and you're going to have so much more grace and compassion and understanding. And that brings you peace, right? It's because you don't have to blame people, because you can look at it and go, I don't know their backstory, but I can have sympathy that there's probably really not great things that have happened in their life, and that's also really sad, right? Because all of this travesty, you guys, it's just sad, right? Like the deeper emotion is it's sad. It's sad that we're capable of doing this to each other. It's sad that both of those men had gone through enough stuff to get them to the place that they were. Like it's just sad. And so compassion and love and understanding, that is going to be the thing that will shift the world into a better place over the long haul. Good. Mm-hmm. All right, guys. We appreciate you guys. Nate, glad you made it on. We didn't know what we were going to do if you didn't make it on today. So.
That streak was gone on a roll there, buddy.
Hopefully you're not working too hard. So if you guys have questions, let us know. Quick reminder, we are going to launch Shift Beta. So it's going to be a 16-week program. We're going to take you through all of this stuff. So if you've gotten these snippets over the last 72 days, and you want to go deeper into this and actually look at this stuff for yourself, reach out. We're getting all the details figured out now, but it should start towards the beginning of July. So we love you guys. We appreciate you. If you got value out of this, we always appreciate you sharing and letting more people hear these messages. So have an awesome Wednesday, and we'll see you guys later.
Thanks, y'all.